Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for November 29th, 2024. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. I hope the food was good. I hope you engaged in discussion on the real world with your friends and relatives, and you had a chance to relax a little bit because now we've got to engage fully in the battle ahead. And I'll be discussing that today. There's no time to rest. There's the International Peace Coalition call, which is today at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Then next week, on the 7th and 8th of December, a two-day online Schiller Institute conference to lay out the strategy to defeat the oligarchy and their war policy. Now, the escalation is continuing. And by continuing, I mean even after the Russians made it clear that they reserve the right to strike anywhere where there's aid being given to those who are attacking Russia, which at this point is the Ukrainians, the so-called Ukrainians, who are really just a hammer being deployed by the Anglo-Americans, that the Russians have said they reserve the right to strike back. And what's the response? More long-range missile attacks into Russia. So let me start. The first question that I received, and it was from many of you, an expression of disbelief at the reaction of NATO officials, such as Admiral Bauer, who is talking about preemptive strikes against Russia. That is, hitting and targeting Russian missile sites, radar sites, and so on, because they're so convinced that Russia is about to launch an attack on them. Now, doesn't someone like Bauer realize that what he's doing is further lowering the threshold for attack? And then, of course, you have the discussion. Again, it's a somewhat muted discussion, but a discussion of providing nuclear weapons to Ukraine. How much more crazy can you get? Well, here's one step further. The French and the British, Macron and Starmer, talking about deploying boots on the ground into Ukraine. Now, the question is this a collective death wish, or do these so-called establishment figures actually believe that they can win a nuclear war and survive it in bunkers and so on? Now, that's the illusion that exists out there. And this is the kind of thinking that exists in the NATO establishment, which is incapable of producing weapons. Their stockpiles have pretty much been depleted. Their populations are growing more angry. The idea of bread and guns, well, they don't have the bread right now. Whole sections of Europe are going through economic crisis, high price electricity, continued inflation, and unpopular governments. So the question of sanity is a legitimate question. I think that the reaction that we saw in the U.S. election was a starting point, not a finishing point. Don't think that you can elect someone who's going to solve all the problems. We have to have an ability to mobilize. And I know many of you know that, and many of you are doing that. So let's use this post-Thanksgiving period as an opportunity to demonstrate that people of all nations prefer peace and are willing to mobilize if there's a clear call to action. Now, here's a second question. I also received this from about, I think, at last count, 7 different people. Why is there no reaction to Trump's appointment of Scott Bessent as the Treasury Secretary? Now, many of you have written that you're concerned because he worked for George Soros. Well, he was a key operator for George Soros. He was involved in the 1992 assault on the British pound, 2013 on the Japanese yen. He became a billionaire because of his operations with Soros. That is speculation. The idea that money is determined by, or economics is determined by money. That's called monetarism. Lyndon LaRouche has written volumes about the disease of monetarism, the belief in money. And the counter approach of LaRouche, which is physical economy. That what we are seeing today is the idea that it's gone back and forth. But if you can speculate, if you can make money, that's good. Doesn't matter how it comes in. And many years ago, LaRouche raised the question, which is better, $10,000 invested in a steel mill or $10,000 invested in a whorehouse? Your immediate return from a whorehouse might be greater, but the moral decline and the failure of that system, that is the corruption, eats away at the fabric of society. And what we're seeing with the entertainment society, the idea of sports and so on, sex, rock, drug, counterculture, it's the whatever makes you feel good is what's of value. And for that, you need money. But we're seeing the negative and degrading effects of that. Now, the question of Besant, he worked for Soros. He worked for Soros in the City of London from 2011 to 2015. Then he got a $2 billion loan from Soros to set up Key Square Group, which is his own hedge fund. And that's how he's made his fortune. Now, in the meantime, he started out as an Al Gore Democrat, a Hillary Clinton Democrat, and only toward the most recent period has he gravitated toward Trump and became a leading fundraiser for Trump and put himself in a position to be appointed to the Treasury Secretary's position. Now, what's his policy? Deregulation of banking. Haven't we learned yet that the deregulation of banking has unleashed the kind of monetarism which has practically destroyed the physical economy of the advanced sector? You put together deregulation, which is essentially central bank funding of debt, handing gobs of money to the speculators, who then turn it around through bets, whether it's bets on currency, bets on stocks, bets on derivatives. As long as there's more liquidity in the system coming from central banks, they believe that they can survive. And that not only that, but the speculators will make a fortune. The rest of us, we can go to hell. So when you have that mentality, then you have to look at the other side of it, which is the anti-government approach which underlies it. Now, this is a short-sighted view which sees government itself as the enemy rather than who's making the policy. And as we've pointed out, we're faced with a problem called corporatism, which is corporate cartels which have seized the power of governments through money creation. The central banks, the Federal Reserve, these are private entities that work on behalf of financial institutions that don't give a flying fig for your health and security. So the question is, what is a constitutional approach to this? And that's why at this point, we have to have a full-scale mobilization to take power away from the corporate cartels. And that's something we can do. Now, if you tear down the state through deregulation and so on, without having an alternative, what do you end up with? Speculators controlling everything. So the problem is the control of money over institutions as opposed to the decisions made by a population, a sovereign population, to produce what's necessary to survive. So that's the fight we have in front of us. I just wrote an article on this. I would point out to you that Elon Musk's embrace of Milton Friedman is not a good idea on his part. I don't think he fully understands it. He's made his fortune through production, through physical economic activity, including at the frontiers of science and technology. The idea that you can become wealthy from that, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But the idea that speculation itself proves that you're a smart businessman is wrong. And I think it's important that if there are hearings, or there will be hearings on Besant, that his role with Soros is brought to the fore. Now there's another question, what's the significance of the southern Lebanon ceasefire? Well, we'll see. It's not clear it's going to last. The problem is that Netanyahu is still in power. Netanyahu is using this to burnish his popularity. But more importantly, he's still preparing a war against Iran. This would be a catastrophic mistake. This would be to play into the hands of the war hawks who insist that the problem in the world is rogue states, whether it's Russia, North Korea, Iran, when the real rogue states are the NATO states that continue to overthrow governments in the name of democracy. It's the hypocrisy of the Blinkens, of the Bidens, of the Macrons that stands out, of the Starmer. You look at the situation in the United Kingdom, where poverty is expanding. People are unhappy. But what's the solution? Well, the solution is a mobilization around the ideas of the LaRouche movement, of sovereign states working together in the West with the Eurasian states, that is the nations in the BRICS, the global South. This is something that Helga Zepp-LaRouche has repeatedly emphasized. I'm sure she'll be bringing this up again today with the International Peace Coalition. She just came back from China, where she keynoted a major conference. So I would urge you, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, log on to the International Peace Coalition meeting. There's a link to it that will be posted in the description box. Final question. Is that an official Jose Vega for Congress cap behind me? You bet it is. Jose's my man. He ran a great campaign, and for him, the campaign is just getting started. What he's saying is vote for yourself, become active, get involved in this. And I think the more Jose's we have, the quicker we're going to get to a resolution of defeating the oligarchy and reestablishing the principles of the sovereign nation state and physical economy. So thanks for joining me today. I'll have the links in the description